All right, folks, glad to have you, really glad to have you at our November webinar. Um, I wonder though, did you see the hail? These are pictures from my family. We live in the Mesa area, and they were like, "What in the world is going on with all of that hail?" And so that's what these two pictures are you're looking at. They are looking at kind of the Riverview and Mesa, but there were other folks. So we had folks in South Phoenix and we had folks in Tucson at different times, but it was later on. And it was a lot of hail. It ended up looking like snow. This is, for Arizona, getting this amount of snow is not that usual. So we're grateful to have a good dump. And we've had a good November so far. So you're looking at some of the November precipitation for Flagstaff, Phoenix, Tucson. That's through last night at midnight. So we're still getting more precipitation, and that's a good thing. So I'm pretty excited to see that. I am going to take you folks back, and we're going to look at what would be summer. So when I look at precipitation for Arizona, I look at June to September. And so that's what you're looking at here. Um, and I think it's great to say that September, October, November that we've just been through, it's a little bit different than what we experienced in June, July, and August this year. And so let's kind of take a look at those 4 months for that summer precipitation. You can see on the map that Yuma and Maricopa counties, they're in the kind of that green color right in through there. You can see that they are standing out on that precipitation map. Yuma County had about 5 times their normal amounts of precipitation in August. And Maricopa County had their 10th wettest September on record. Overall, though, I expect the statewide June to September to be below average. But let's take a look here at October. And October was another wet amount of precipitation when, it ended above average for Arizona when we're looking at the October precipitation. So we're thrilled with that. You can see that Flagstaff, Phoenix, Tucson, where they stood with their October, the statewide precipitation. CPC and National Weather Service were able to provide some early outlooks for that really unusual October event. It was an interesting event. It was a low pressure system. It came in from the West Coast. And then there were remnants of tropical cyclones. We had Priscilla and Raymond coming in, bringing in extra moisture. It was quite the event. You can kind of see some of the things that happened. This is just a little bit of some of those events, but I did want to bring forward that this was an early outlook. We were warned a little bit ahead of time, which is good. We want people to be aware. And then here, let's take a look at the last 12 months. The map is showing the average temperature rankings. And so that's from November 2024 to October 2025. So it's putting all of those months together and looking at where they rank overall. And so when you look at the charts, you'll see the statewide rankings for each month. So last year, September, October, December, those months ended with their record hottest for the state. Only 2 months of the last 12 have been below average. You can see those as November and January. They were in the blue colors right in through there on the charts. And so we're grateful to have that, but we're still seeing a lot of those second hottest, 19th hottest, those warmer months. But looking at this, so now we're looking at a map that's showing precipitation rankings from November 2024 to October 2025. And if we take a look at what we've been experiencing, some of it hasn't been bad. But if you remember last December and January, if we add those together, that was the driest December and January on record for the state. So it was really dry last winter. May and June, when we had those coming in, you can see on the chart that those are in those green colors. May and June were above average for the state. And so we're happy to see that. And in fact, they landed in their top 10% wettest. But I think it's important to understand that when we look at May and June precipitation, statistically, those are the driest months for Arizona. So overall, getting greater amounts of precipitation in May and June, not bad, but still lower amounts. And then we pop into July and August for the monsoon season. Those were really dry, below average. But then here comes September, and that ended above average. And then so did October. So it's not bad. We had 4 wetter months this year. I'll take them for sure. And I think it's helpful to understand when we're looking at how this influences our winter precipitation. So we're definitely thinking about winter precipitation right now, and it's impacted by what happens with summer and fall conditions. So what we're wanting to understand is looking at our soil moisture and kind of that percentage. Are we drier or are we wetter? When we have wetter soil moisture conditions as we're heading into winter, that affects what happens with our runoff in the spring. So we talk about that efficiency for runoff of our snow water equivalent in the spring. And if we have a lot of soil moisture through the winter, as we come and start melting that snowpack in the spring, that affects that efficiency for the runoff. And that affects what happens with our water supply. So if you take a look at those two maps right in through there, you can see that soil moisture percentage in August to September, that was still very low for Arizona. We were very dry. But these recent wet events have helped improve the soil moisture, and those will likely help in spring. So it looks good. We're liking to see that. I did want to look at that short-term drought seasonal outlook. Arizona will likely see, that most of that short-term drought kind of persisting. So that's why you're seeing in Arizona those brown colors on our map. But some of that short-term drought, especially along the rim, down along Gila County, Graham, Greenlee, Cochise, Pima, Santa Cruz, those counties might see some improvement. So we'll be looking forward to that. I did want to bring this in. So for the end of November, what we're looking at here, the CPC is giving a more active end to November and a start to December. So that's the 8 to 14-day outlook. Remember, this is just an outlook. It's not a forecast. And then since we've got Thanksgiving next week, let's see if I've got it. There it is. Since we've got Thanksgiving next week, it looks like, you know, when you compare that outlook, it's all green there, but comparing it to one of our forecast models, you can see that we're expecting maybe drier conditions over Arizona for our Thanksgiving. We'll have to wait and see. Keep your eyes on the National Weather Service forecast in your area, but fingers crossed that we all enjoy going outside for our Thanksgiving events in Arizona. And then let's take a look at this, looking at our seasonal outlooks from CPC. And, Arizona is expecting warmer and drier conditions as a result, and you can kind of see it there on the brown parts and the warmer parts, definitely. And that's for kind of December, January, February for that seasonal outlook. The expectation is a 33 to 50% drier condition for December, January, February. But let's go to the next slide and see how ENSO is playing a role in this outlook. And there it is. Weak La Nina conditions, they're currently being observed right now along the equatorial sea surface temperatures. So you're looking at those anomalies right there. But statistically, when we're looking at a La Nina for Arizona, our our winters are usually drier during a La Nina. It doesn't mean there won't be any storms. And You might remember we actually have had a very wet La Nina winter. That was 2023. So, yes, absolutely, we'll be keeping our eyes on what's going to happen with that precipitation. But statistically, La Nina tends to bring a drier winter for Arizona. And so we always appreciate making sure, we've got the latest information on weather, water, and climate for you. And so you can actually pop in, check our website, and get that information. Um, just an FYI, we don't usually have webinars in December and January, so our next webinar will actually be in February. So that should probably give us a good conversation about winter precipitation at that point. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next presenter. So we're really grateful to have our guest speaker, Vidi Quinones. Sorry, Vidi, about that. Vidi is the forest health specialist for the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management. And you can see how that all kind of works together with weather, water, and climate. Vidi does really important things for the state. One of the things that I want to join her on is an aerial survey, and that monitors the insects, the diseases in our forests and our urban areas. So next time, Vidi, absolutely. But thank you for talking to us today, and I'll go ahead and let you take over.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, again, my name is Viri Quiñones, Forest Health Specialist with DFFM. Um, yeah, one part of my job is doing aerial detection surveys every year of dead and dying trees and identifying areas of insect and disease occurrences across the state. This is only my fourth season conducting these surveys, and I've definitely seen a fluctuation in damage year after year. And it's all, yeah, related to precipitation and drought and temperature and all of that. Today, I'll be sharing only general observations of what we saw during the aerial survey season, just because this data is currently being processed and analyzed, so I don't have exact acres to share with you all today, but I do have a nice slideshow of photos and just some general highlights of what we saw throughout Arizona. Next slide. So to begin, I don't know how familiar everyone is with our agency, so I do just want to give a little bit of background as to who we are and what we do. The Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management, we provide services for fire prevention, urban and community forestry, forest stewardship, forest health, utilization and marketing, and we have a wide variety of grants that are available. Specifically, the Forest Health Program provides education, technical assistance, and cooperative integrated management strategies to help prevent and manage native, non-native, and invasive insects and diseases, as well as plants and plant outbreaks in an attempt to help achieve healthy forests, woodland, riparian, and desert stand conditions. Next slide. So there are two sides to our forest health program, and that includes our invasive plants program and then the insect and disease part of it, which is what I'm a part of. So we are partially funded by the Forest Service, and we're required to use that funding to help monitor, detect, and evaluate forest health conditions through the collection of standardized data. This just ensures compatibility across the region, and one of those ways is through our aerial surveys. Next slide. Yeah, so our aerial detection survey program is completed every year, and it's in a combined effort with the Forest Service. We typically survey around 15 million acres annually, and we use an app that's created by the Forest Service on a tablet that standardizes the data we collect, since we're not the only state that does aerial surveys. So as we're flying, we're able to draw points and polygons of all the damage we see on the landscape. We try our best to map everything that's going on as we're flying. You can see the photo of the tablet there. It looks a little complicated because it contains all our flight lines and all of our polygons and points. Yeah, and then that's a picture of the crew there in the plane. It's a very small plane. Next slide. So our surveys are typically conducted between July and September. So we do keep an eye out on the drought monitors because drought and temperature impact forest health and can increase the likelihood of pathogens and insect infestations. So the map in the middle there shows all of the insect and disease observations from 2024 in comparison to the drought conditions going into the surveys. So in July of 2024, according to the drought monitor, you can see that a lot of the state was experiencing abnormal dry conditions and moderate drought going into that survey season. And most of the insect and disease damage usually occurs within those areas where we're experiencing drought. There's also usually some scattered observations in the woodlands and sky islands there in southern Arizona, but as usual, the majority of our observations are seen along and above that Mogollon Rim, where the bulk of our ponderosa pine forests are found. Going into our 2025 survey season, the state was experiencing severe and extreme drought conditions, and we found, drought stress trees all across the state, and a bit of an increase in drought damage from the previous year. Just because of that relationship between drought and forest health, we can usually use these drought monitors to kind of predict the severity of damage we might see on the landscape during our surveys. Next slide. So this is a map representing how the agency divides the state into 5 districts. So we have our Northeast District, Northern, Northwest, Central, and Southeast districts. And each district shares similar forest and woodland health issues. While they might experience varying degrees of tree damage from insects and disease, they all usually share common issues. So I'll be quickly just sharing just a few issues per district, but just know that some level of bark beetle, drought, defoliator, damage, etc., can be found on most, if not all, the districts. I'm just showing a couple photos per district. I tried to include a little bit of everything in this presentation today. Next slide. All right, so starting in our northern district, which includes the Kaibab and Coconino National Forests, along with the Grand Canyon National Park and the Navajo, Wallapai, Havasupai, and Kaibab reservations. We saw scattered bark beetle tree mortality on the Coconino and Kaibab. This photo here shows a group of dead trees there and the brown tops there in a mixed conifer stand due to bark beetle. I believe this particular photo was taken on the Coconino. But this is usually how bark beetle tree mortality is presented and in clusters of trees. In times of significant drought, we can start to see landscape levels of tree mortality like you'll see in some of my later pictures. And I'll add that, bark beetles are usually a secondary pest. So they're really attracted to drought stressed trees. Those chemicals that trees are giving off when they're stressed are really what are bringing bark beetles to the areas. Next slide. So during the season, we were also getting calls about the defoliation of alders along Oak Creek and Sedona. And so these photos were taken while we were ground truthing some of the polygons we had flown to map this damage. So that's also something we try our best at is try to confirm what we saw in the air by visiting the polygons we drew and confirming tree species, damage, causal agent, or even just the size of the area that was affected. Anyway, these photos show the defoliation of alder along Oak Creek due to alder flea beetle. The alder flea beetle larvae feed on the tissue between the veins of the leaf, and it results in a skeletonized appearance. So the top right photo just shows an up-close visual of that skeletonization. And then that group of trees are all pretty defoliated. Those are the blue beetles there on the right, on the bark of the tree there. Next slide. So the Northeast District, this is composed of our Navajo, Apache, Fort Apache, and Hopi reservations, as well as the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. In general, tree mortality was most severe in the lower elevation forest types across the Apache Sitgreaves and the adjacent San Carlos and White Mountain Apache tribal lands. Bark beetle caused mortality of ponderosa pine was high across the Apache Sitgreaves. Mortality was widespread along the ponderosa pine to pinyon juniper woodland transition zone. Pinyon Ips activity was also especially high in that Heber Overguard area, very noticeable along Highway 260, as you can see in the city there. The right picture on the right is of a dying pinyon pine due to Pinyon Ips as well. Next slide. These photos here just show that widespread pine mortality. The picture on the left was taken along the 260, and the photo on the right was taken on the Clifton Ranger District. Again, just more of that widespread pine mortality on that northeast district there. I think this was probably the worst we saw, I think, all summer. Next slide. So moving on to our Southeast District, which is composed of the Ak-Chin, Tohono O'odham, and San Xavier reservations, as well as the Coronado National Forest and Sky Islands. These areas are also, surrounded by county, state land, and some military military land as well. We basically saw a lot of drought throughout the Coronado, specifically these large areas of juniper dieback that were incited by drought. Well, we mapped at the base of the Huachucas. These photos were taken at the base of the Huachucas. So the picture on the left was from the air, and the picture on the right was from getting out there on the ground. You can see just those landscape level damage that was incited by drought. The surrounding oak and pinyon were also affected, along with the manzanita. And I didn't see much insect damage on the juniper, so this was specifically drought caused tree mortality. Next slide. It's just these are the Sky Islands. I believe these are the Chiricahuas. Again, scattered bark beetle mortality on those Sky Islands. And on the Coronado pines, which we include as the Apache, Ponderosa, Arizona, and Chihuahua pines that are up there. Next slide. And this was Mount Lemmon. So again, bark beetle tree mortality. I went up there last week and ended up seeing some bark beetle activity and took these photos here of them just kind of doing their bark beetle thing on Ponderosa. It was still pretty warm up there, so they hadn't gone into dormancy. So we were able to see some bark beetles, but hopefully with these temperatures going down, they should be going into that dormant period. Next slide. Moving on to our central district. So this includes the Tonto National Forest, the San Carlos, Gila, and Salt Rivers, Fort Howell Reservation. Again, just some scattered bark beetle mortality that was found on the Tonto. Picture on the right might be a little hard to see, but there's just some scattered yellowing brown tops of trees. And then the picture on the left, I ended up circling those brown trees there as well. Next slide. This is our Northwest District. So it's composed of the Prescott National Forest, Fort Mojave Reservation, and some county, state lands, and military land as well. This photo is depicting just the juniper dieback on the Chino Ranger District, again, incited by drought. So you can kind of see where those junipers are slightly more brown and not as green as the rest of the landscape. So I ended up circling that in red so you can kind of see it a little more clear. Next slide. So we saw some of this what we call branch flagging while we were flying. So you can kind of see that the trees are like the tips of trees are kind of browning. It's kind of sporadic. We mapped this on other districts as well. And it's usually caused by Prescott scale, twig beetles, cankers, or drought. They can all have that similar appearance, but while ground truthing this particular area on the Prescott National Forest, we found this fluffy white wax on the needles, which most likely is from Prescott scale. In the spring, the females will lay their eggs in groups and cover it in the fluffy white wax on the branch nodes. So we're seeing a lot of this on the National Forest, as well as some of the northern and northeast districts as well. Next slide. So I know that was a lot of information really fast, but if you want more detail and exact acres of anything I presented, the Forest Health Conditions Report should be out early next year. After we collect all this data and it gets processed and analyzed, we put it all together in a report. So it's provided to land managers and the public following the survey season. And land managers can use the data to help plan projects and any kind of thinning work or anything. And it can be found on our website along with our past reports. So you can see what the leading issues were in a given year. In times of significant drought, trees become increasingly stressed and more susceptible to insect and disease infestation. Specifically, bark beetle caused tree mortality increases following times of drought. So their activity can be an indicator of drought severity. Next slide. So overall, this summer of 2025, we saw that tree mortality due to drought stress was relatively high. The insect and disease-related tree mortality was scattered throughout Arizona and also high compared to last year. These increases were seen throughout the state in a variety of tree species. So ponderosa pine, Douglas fir, pinyon, juniper, yeah, just a variety of tree species. Forest health conditions are always changing, and with the drought being an ongoing issue in Arizona, we expect to continue seeing frequent fluctuations in drought-related tree mortality and stress. This precipitation is helpful, and so hopefully we get more moisture this winter and spring so that, in the summer we aren't seeing so many dead trees. Next slide. Yep, and that's all I have. Again, the Forest Health Conditions Report will be available on our website at dffm.az.gov, and we'll early next year, and it'll go into more detail covering acreage and details about the insects and diseases, and we also cover urban forestry issues as well. Any questions?
Oh, thank you so much, Vidi. That was amazing, and that was great information to have and to understand.